4.
Hi, my name is Elyssa Rabinowitz. I'm here in Jerusalem. We're very happy to have you joining us for the Global Day of Jewish Learning all around the world. I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of Kol Ha'od, Illuminating Jewish Life Through Art. And we are delighted to have you here with us this evening in Chutzat HaYotzer, the artist colony in the old city of overlooking the old city of Jerusalem. And what we do at Kol Ha'od is we use the arts as a vehicle for engaging with Jewish ideas, texts, and values. Today, I would love to take you on a visit to our inspiration and mentor of Kol Ha'od, the artist David Moss, who's also my father. And what we're going to be doing is sharing with you how we use the arts, and specifically in this case, his art, to inspire and teach Jewish ideas, texts, and values. So we'll start here. I'm going to take you on a little walk to his studio. We'll go into his studio, and then we'll bring you over to our Kol Ha'od gallery, where we use the artwork to teach, to engage participants in workshops, and show you a little bit of how we do that. So here we are, walking down the lane. I'm going to see if I can find his studio. There he is. Abba, say hello. Hi, everybody. Okay, and now we're gonna walk into the studio.
Hello, everybody. So delighted to be with you for the next hour and to be able to share with you some of the work we do with the intersection between the aesthetics, the creative, and Jewish ideas and texts. This is what I have devoted my career to for the past probably 48 years. You are now in my messy studio, and I tried to clean up a little bit for you, but you'll forgive the clutter. What I have basically done over these 48 years is to try to create this integration between beauty and Judaism, to take and find the aesthetic and the creative, and for me they go hand in hand, and attempt to give creative form to whatever project I happen to be working on. And you'll see I work in a lot of different media, which I'll share with you over the next period. My career started with a fascination with the Hebrew letters. I was here studying in Jerusalem in 1968 and had a friend who was a Torah scribe. And he wrote out an alphabet for me, the way the scribes write the Hebrew letters, and it just fascinated me. I had had no art training, no calligraphy training, but I just started copying the letters, and everything you're going to see this evening has kind of blossomed and flowered from that moment of a long love affair with the 22 Hebrew letters. The commonality in my work that you will see as we go through it are three things. I start always with a text, with study, with an immersion in our tradition. It's what I call the head part, the intellectual part. Always I want it to be authentic and to come out of our tradition. So every project starts with a great deal of study, learning, and accessing our rich Jewish tradition, textual tradition. The second part is what I call the heart, and that is the creative. Whatever I do, whether it's an architectural project or a book or a manuscript or an object or an educational program, I wanted to have that spark of freshness, newness, and creativity. that I think is very important in order to convey these texts in new ways. The third piece is the hand, the head, the heart, and the hand. The third piece is the hand. And for me, that has to do with the craft. Whatever project I'm working on, I will take the time, the effort, the energy to do it well, to make it well crafted. I believe these are acts of devotion, and the same kind of devotion one would do to study or learning or prayer can be done with art as well. And I've always tried to do that. The sort of beginning of my career was the revival of the hand-done Ketubah, the Jewish marriage contract. And that's the first thing I'm going to be showing you, some of the work that I've done in that. There was a very rich tradition in olden times all over Europe and the Middle East of making the Ketubah, the marriage contract, a beautiful work of art. It doesn't have to be done visually or beautifully, aesthetically, but it developed a wonderful tradition of folk art and fine art of making these ancient documents beautiful to enhance the wedding and the joy of the bride and the groom. I had seen books published on this old art form and got very excited about them when I started looking at the lettering and the calligraphy. And I asked who's doing that now and where can I find them? And they said, people told me, oh, that died out about 100 years ago. We no longer do them. It's now a printed form that the rabbi fills in and hands to the couple after the wedding. So I started doing them for friends, and then people started coming to me. And I would now like to start by sharing with you some of the ketubot and the way I go about integrating the couple and their interests and their loves and their desires with a work of art. This is a 3-volume work I'll be showing you based on my ketubot. It's called Tradition, Transition, and Transformation. Tradition, with the arrow pointing backwards, are 10 ketubot inspired by the illuminated manuscript tradition. So this is where I'm drawing on these old ketubot and looking at them and trying to create for each couple a unique, perfect work to celebrate their wedding. Some of the techniques I'll use, you can see, are the paper cuts. This is all cut out, gold leaf, and what's called micrography. The outer border is tiny, tiny Hebrew writing to form text, an ancient Jewish art form. So you'll see that every one of these is different. Here I use the name of the couple in Hebrew, or Dov and Tzipporah. Dov means bear, Tzipporah means bird. So they go around the ketubah. The initial aleph in the middle is for their last name, and so forth. Each one different, each one customized. I interview the couple, I find out who they are, what they're about, what's important to them, and try to create the perfect work for them. Here they were musicians, so I used the little musicians in an Islamic style, Middle Eastern flavor. Some of these were done for weddings and some for anniversaries. Once I started doing them for friends and for weddings, and people saw them who were already married, asked me to see if I could make one for them, even though they already had a ketubah. So many of these were done after the fact to celebrate a 10th, 25th, or 50th anniversary. Again, the paper cuts, the detail, the flowers going around.
I'm just going to take a break here to say that if we'll be taking questions and answers at the end. So if anyone has any question as we're going through the artwork or the whole session, please write it into the chat to the website, and we'll be able to answer them towards the end. Thanks.
The second volume is called Transition, and I'm using the gate arch motif. Often in the old Ketubot, they were in the form of an arch, suggesting the chuppah, the Jewish marriage canopy, the new stage of life, the home, the gateway, the passageway. So this is where I'm using that arch motif in different ways. Gold. Everyone customized, everyone different. Each one has a story behind it. This was a 25th anniversary, and as I'm interviewing the couple, I heard them describe how important Shabbat was in their family and how they always got together a Friday night with the family. And then she said, in fact, my husband, every single week for the last 25 years we're married, has brought me flowers for Shabbat. So I multiplied 52 weeks times 25 years, and that's the exact number of flowers in the Ketubah. So I try to make them all meaningful to the couple, to the people. I did hundreds of these actually over the years, and this is what really started the revival of the hand ketubah in the late 60s and early 70s. It's now become a mini industry in America. There are probably hundreds of ketubah artists, but this is the work that really got it all going. So I've collected it in several books. At the end, I've included the letters that I always write to the couple explaining why I do what I do and how I got to that particular one for them. The third volume is called Transformation. Now the arrow's pointing forward. And it's called Innovation, 10 Ketubot in non-traditional styles. Since I knew I was deliberately reviving a tradition, I didn't want them simply to be always based on the old manuscript traditions, but wanted to think of what a ketubah might look like in the 20th century, more contemporary, more graphic. So these are some that I've collected in which I've done that. The text is the same ancient Aramaic text going back about 2,400 years. It guarantees the rights for the bride, both in the marriage and if the marriage ends in either divorce or death. It's financial. It's not a very exciting document. It's basically an insurance policy, but in past and now, we Jews try to make beauty out of everything. So this is collage where the text is written over. Here the entire text is paper cut. Each letter is cut out, the sculpted letters around. So everyone is different. Everyone is based on the couple themselves. Their interests, their feelings about each other, their relationship to their Judaism, their relationship to Israel. I try to find out as much as I can. Sometimes they'll write me a 10-page letter about who they are, and that's always helpful for me to know how to start and how to take who they are and translate it into the perfect marriage document for them. This one is based on a midrash from the Zohar of the book of Jewish mysticism. And it says that when a soul first comes down to earth, it comes down as one, not distinguished between male and female. When it comes onto the earth, then they're split apart. And says the midrash, the couple then hopefully gets back together. So this is the midrash itself, and then the text begins at the narrowest point. And this is the Ketubah with the signatures. These are always signed by two witnesses. Jerusalem is a common theme in the old Ketubot based on a verse in Psalms. I will lift Jerusalem above my chief joy. Your chief joy was your wedding, your marriage celebration. So very often in the old Ketubot, and in mine as well, I'll have some mention of Yerushalayim, where we are now talking to you from. This is kind of an interesting one, 50th anniversary, and the woman had spent her life brailing text for blind children. You see the walls of the old city, but then between each line of writing, there are little flowers with golden centers in the original raised, which are actually Hebrew Braille. Different verses that I chose based on the couple. Here again, the Jerusalem theme, three-dimensional. Again, and the letters. In addition to this 3-volume work, I created also a book, a kind of gift book, wedding gift book called Love Letters, a celebration of Jewish love and marriage in word and images. And what I did in this book was matched each double spread is a ketubah I did for a couple, details from it matched with a quote on love and marriage from Bible to modern times. Ketubah detail quote. Ketubah detail quote. And then the letters that I wrote to the couple. So it includes many of the ketubot that I did. Also comes with the traditional 7 wedding blessings that are recited at each Jewish wedding as prints that the couple can use at the wedding and frame afterwards. 7 blessings. The next thing I'd like to share with you is a Passover Haggadah, the book used to celebrate the Exodus of Egypt, when we tell on Passover night the story of the Jews going out of Egypt and relate it to our children. I received a private commission for a hand-done Haggadah. I was commissioned to write out the entire text and illustrate it as I saw fit for a private family. When I did it, it was never intended to be printed, but after it was finished, it was published in this perfect facsimile edition, which is what I'll share with you. Each page starts with an idea. I always look at that section and try to figure out what's important in it, what's meaningful, what's fresh, and how I can give it fresh expression. So page 1, for instance, is about beginnings, as is Passover itself. It's the birth of the Jewish people. It comes in the springtime when nature is reborn. So it's about beginnings. And I wanted to think a little bit about what is so special about a beginning. What is the beginning? You see the tree image. What is the beginning of the tree in the seed, or the person as an infant, or indeed the Jewish people at the moment of our birth at the Exodus? And what it seemed to me was that what's important and interesting is that every beginning contains the whole in potential. The seed of the tree somehow holds that whole tree and what it can become in potential. So I wanted that idea conveyed on page 1, the beginning of the Haggadah, the birth of the Haggadah, as it were. So the border here, the microscopic lettering here, is in fact the entire Haggadah going around the border. So page 1, like the seed of the tree, holds everything that is later to come, the entire Haggadah. Similarly, each page is thought out and researched what I want to do, how I can express this in a fresh way. The Passover Haggadah may be one of the most published books in the world, only after the Bible in more editions, tens of thousands of editions, but yet it constantly creates new versions and people trying to express these ideas over and over again. And that for me is part of what beauty is, and the beauty of our tradition is that it can always be looked at fresh and seen new ideas. On this page, these pages I should say, are based on a Hebrew root. Every Hebrew word has usually a 3-letter root. And the root I was interested in, the root word, is the root avad with an ayin. And its basic meaning is work, but it has this range of meanings in the Haggadah from avadim hayinu, we were slaves. It's the word for slave, but it's also the word for service. And I thought that was very interesting, that the notion of Passover is coming out of the kind of work that is servitude and to come into the kind of work that is service or serving God. So how do I capture that visually? On this page, I'm showing the pre-Exodus work, the slavery that our ancestors did in Egypt, making the bricks, baking them, bringing the mortar, the water, and being forced to build the cities for Pharaoh in Egypt. The micrographic border going around are all biblical verses where the Hebrew root avad has the meaning of servitude or slavery. For me, turning the page now becomes the Exodus is metaphorical for the Exodus. As the work is transformed, I don't know if you can see it, but this is paper cut. So the silhouettes are the same, but now the meaning has been transformed. They're milling the wheat, bringing water, forming, baking, kneading, and baking the matzot for Passover, doing divine service instead of human servitude. So similarly, every page of the book starts with a concept, an idea, and then how it's worked out visually. This is the search for leaven, where I compare it to the scientific inquiry as we're looking closer and closer at the wheat, down to the starch, and the enzyme beta amylase, which is responsible for fermentation biochemically. Each page, a little world in its own, an immersion into the ideas, the texts, the commentaries that had traditionally been written about the Haggadah, mining it for a new insight, a new idea, the new fresh way of doing it. Seder, of course, means order, and this is, we start by reciting the order of the Seder, Kadeshu Rachatz, Karpas Yachatz. I did them upward because ideally, throughout the evening, we're elevating ourselves spiritually, so we're going upwards. In the middle, I've shown the Seder plate objects, the shank bone, egg, parsley, etc. The 4 cups that we use, the 3 matzot, unleavened bread, and the 2 washing. So these are all the objects that are used throughout the year. And the little steps that go up are each a miniature of that image. The blank in each case points you to the object that you're going to take at that point in the Seder. So it's a kind of key or table, literal table of contents of the book. Each page idea, each page a little world on its own. I use the paper cuts because when I did the book, and I used the gold leaf, and you'll see pasted on things as well. When I did the original, I never intended it to be printed. It was a one-off commission. So whatever I felt like doing, the original is on real parchment. I did the cutouts, the gold, and so forth. When it came time to eventually publish the book, it meant that it was quite a endeavor to figure out how to reproduce all these things perfectly like in the original. The four sons, four children of the Haggadah, done as Renaissance playing cards. The notion that as parents or educators, we don't control what children we get. They're kind of dealt to us like in a game of chance, and we have to play our hand according to what we're given, which is really exactly the idea of the Midrash of the four children, that every child is different, every child is unique, and you have to answer each child from the place they're coming from, not the place you're coming from. It took me 3 years to do the original. I delivered it to the family, and that was presumably the end of the project. A few years afterwards, another family saw photographs that I had of the original and sort of said it's unacceptable that there's only one copy of this book in the world. Let's publish it. I said, I think it's impossible to print this book for reasons you've already seen and reasons you will see, but they were insistent, and eventually I found this wonderful printer in Italy who took up the challenge and absolutely perfectly reproduced the book you're seeing. This is one of the 550 limited edition copies. It's also been done in a trade edition and a deluxe edition as well. Let's see if we can peek in here and see what's happening on this page. Are you getting that? Mm-hmm. As I open it, you perhaps can see the little reflections in the mirrors. What's happening here is the text of the Haggadah says, in each and every generation, a person must see themselves as if they personally came out of Egypt. The idea of the Haggadah is that we're supposed to not only be celebrating our past ancestors coming out of Egypt, but feel that actual liberation in ourselves. But the language is, the Haggadah is very curious. In each and every generation, you must see yourself, it says, as if you came out of Egypt. So I thought, well, when do you see yourself? When you look in a mirror. And what I did was I did the research to find how Jewish people dressed in each generation throughout history. These are all authentic costumes, the men on one side, the women on the other. Between each one is a little mirror, hand applied, so that when the book is closed, each one is seeing him or herself in the mirror opposite. As you open it, you see them seeing themselves as you did before. And when it's open, you see yourself among all the generations of Jewish history, just as the Haggadah says. We become part of the story. We raise the second cup and begin Hallel, the singing of Hallelujah. The first psalm, when Israel came out of Egypt, I depicted by tiny little Jews, each one of which is a musical note that play out two Hasidic tunes to this psalm. The staffs in their hands are the bar divisions, and their heads the notes. They continue over here. This is the end of the telling of the tale, the section we call the Magid. And according to the Talmud, it says you should seal it off with redemption, saying this long blessing God as the Redeemer of Israel. So I use the First Temple seal made for me by the Israel Museum for the original, and also enlarged it here with very, very tiny writing in the book. The sandwich of Hillel cutouts, the maror between the matzot, the set table, the place to list the guests that come to the family each year over the generations. The eating of afikomen, the blessing after the meal. Here, the opening of the door and the text that each community recites in a map of that country and a typical Jewish home with the door open. Pour out, says the text. So I have a little cup that pours. Flip through. Variant readings with a little 2-page book there. And the last page next year in Jerusalem, like the first page, a micrographic border, this time containing 70 different verses with 70 different names for Jerusalem throughout the Bible, and the songs at the end. The Haggadah was also published in 2 other versions. This is what we call the trade edition, smaller format. For each page of the book, I've written an article about the ideas and the research that went into it. So the way that people use the book tends to be to read 1 or 2 pages each year, find out what I wrote, how I got to the images and the ideas, and then present those at the Seder table, the next year doing a few more. Show this. As you can probably notice already, I love books. We are a book-oriented culture, and so I've done a lot of what are called artist books, using the book form to express Jewish ideas. This is actually a little 2-page glass book that I did based on the wonderful prayer of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who talks about the great value of peace. And one of the things he says in that prayer, it's a very beautiful prayer, is that God has the ability to take things that conflict and oppose each other and bring them together in peace and love. So I, as a calligrapher, looked at the Hebrew letters, at the contradictory elements of it, the horizontal pieces and the verticals. That's what make the Hebrew letters. I put all the horizontals on this page of the book and the verticals here, so that when it closes, it's the actual text of the prayer. Again, taking Jewish ideas, taking Jewish texts, and giving them fresh, creative expression. I'd like to take you now into a different medium. Most of what you've seen so far have been prints or books, 2-dimensional works, though the Haggadah, as you saw, is starting to get into the 3rd dimension. But this piece is really where I kind of moved into the 3rd dimension, a piece of furniture that I did as a collaboration with a wonderful artist here in Israel named Noah Greenberg, who lives up in Sfat. And it's based on the traditional Jewish prayer study stand, which traditionally would look something like this, a very simple affair. I call it the overlooked object of Judaica. Was always very primitive, very simple, a few pieces of wood knocked together. But it seemed to me to be important because on this stand, Jews do two of the most important things we can do, and that is to study and to pray. It's the place of prayer and the place of Jewish learning. So it unites the Jewish heart and the Jewish mind. And as soon as I realized that, I had the notion that it really, what was missing is the hand. We're not only about the intellect and about the emotion and the spiritual part, but we engage the world in a hands-on way. So I asked myself, how could this simple object be turned into something that also represents how we engage with our hands in the mitzvot, in the commandments? So what Noah and I created is this, also in wood, the traditional material. We call it the Tree of Life Stender. Stender is the Yiddish word for this prayer stand. And what we've done is we put within it all the other ritual objects that we use every day, every week, and every year. So the upper compartment holds the daily objects, the siddur, a box for the tefillin, all hand carved, each one based on a different plant of the land of Israel. Again, taking and trying to create beauty out of the objects that we use. The front opens for the weekly objects, the candelabrum for the Shabbat, the Sabbath candles, the challah board, Kiddush set. There are about 14 objects hidden within the stender. From the sides come the holiday objects, Hanukkah, Pesach. This is for the lulav. It opens. If the lulav is longer, it extends. Again, taking the objects and trying to give them beauty, to give them new, fresh, creative, aesthetic expression. The Hanukkah Menorah comes from the other side. The Miracle of Hanukkah was the olives burning in the temple. So we use the olive motif. Each of the little olives opens for olive oil burning with a wick. So that's the Tree of Life stender. The next thing I'll show you is kind of a future project that I'm working on. I've done a lot of architectural work where I help Jewish institutions that are either remodeling or building, and trying to give the same kind of Jewish content to the building that I do to a Ketubah or a Haggadah. So I've done a number of projects in the United States where I work with the architects, work with the building committees, and try to give a creative Jewish expression to take the values and the ideas of the institution and make them part of the building itself. In keeping with this, I also have a project in the works that I'm trying to work on, which I call a Garden of Jewish Exploration. And this would be a place where Jewish ideas and values are conveyed aesthetically, beautifully, and interactively in a garden setting here in Israel. In order to do that, I created this model. You might want to go up a little closer. which I call a kind of mind map of Judaism, with her in the middle facing forward. This has to do with all the values, what's behind me, the things we inherit from the past. The green is what surrounds me, how we interact with nature and the universe. Underneath her, what's deep inside me, the inner life, the emotional life, what's above me, the elevation, the divine, the reaching upward. Whom do I face? All the interpersonal parts of Judaism. I'm really trying to take all the Jewish ideas and values and place them so that a visitor to such a garden can understand how the Jewish concepts work together. Whom do I face? Family, community, business relationships, marriage, how we relate to all of humanity, and finally, what's ahead of me. What I'd like to do now with you is look at a couple projects that in Kol HaOt we have been especially using to teach and inspire with. Part of one of the architectural projects I did, a school in Texas, the Akiva Yavna School, and for that project, I created a mural of a biblical story, 45 feet long, the story of the binding of Isaac from Genesis 22 for the children. I also published it as an artist book. And the rest of the time we have, I think, together, we'll take you through a couple of these projects, and Elyssa across the street will show you how we actually get the Jewish juice out of these educationally, inspirationally, and how the beauty can be shared with others. So what I did for this project was I took the story, well-known story of Abraham being told by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. I analyzed it carefully and tried to get it down to the minimum number of elements that I could, and I managed to get it down to 10. I then assigned a color to each element, so wherever you see blue, you know that's God. Time, I felt, was an important element in the story, so I gave it yellow. Abraham, white. Isaac, red. People, animals, plants, land, knife, and fire, each one with its color. Once I had the color key, I could then go back to the story and word for word translate it into images for these kids. And I'll just run through a few of them briefly for you. The story reads, and it came to pass after these things, you see the arrow of time passing, that God, blue, did test Abraham, white. He becomes a scale on which to weigh him. And God called to Abraham and said, Abraham, and he said, Hineni, here I am. And God said, take your son, remember Isaac was red, your only son, the one you love, Isaac, and go to the land which God will tell you, the land of Moriah, and offer him on one of the mountains which I will show you. So Abraham got up early in the morning, remember time, took his donkey and his two servants and his son Isaac, and cut the wood for the sacrifice and set out for the land that God would show him. On the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the land from afar. So it's virtually every word of the story translated into these images. And when we get across the way, you'll see how we then use that educationally to inspire and to get kids and adults thinking about Jewish text. The other one we've used, another one we used very successfully with Kol HaOt is a piece based on Midot. the human attributes. What does it mean to be a full human being Jewishly? What we mean by that are that we have midot, which are attributes, personality traits, things that we strive for. I humorously call this mensch maker, make me a mensch, because that's what a mensch is Jewishly, someone who has these midot. So Elyssa will tell you more on the other side about these and how we use them, but things like humility or justice or awe, truth, love, and so forth. What I did for each one was I created a meditation poem and a collage image for each one. And then we use them educationally in a very powerful way. Another piece that we did, especially for this Teachers Institute for the Arts that we're doing, where we're helping Jewish schools, day schools around North America, integrate creativity and the arts into their Jewish teaching. So I did this piece. It's the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meal prayer that we say after eating a meal with bread. And I took each section of it and looked at the meaning of it, again, for kids, for education, to stop and slow down and think about what each part of it is. So we've given these to each of our teachers in our Teachers Institute to teach from. And it was then published as a comic book venture called the OMG Venture. And Elyssa will talk to you a little bit about that in a moment. So I will meet you over there. Take care. See you soon.
Hi, everyone. So we're now across the way in our lovely Kol Ha'od studio, also in Chutzad HaYotzer. And our space here is really large. We have, I'll just give you a little bit of a tour. We have a nice area where our artists and residents can work. We have a large space where we hold our workshops for groups, visiting groups. We have rotating exhibits here. And what I'd like to do for the last few minutes is share with you how we take the type of work that you saw before and really use it as an educational tool. We call this type of artwork teachable art, which for us, we saw time after time how people that perhaps don't have the opportunity to engage with Jewish texts in other ways can really get meaning and magic out of the Jewish ideas and texts when presented in the artistic format. So what Kol Ha'od was created to do is to be an organization which uses this type of teachable art as an educational tool. We work with adult groups and students. We run, as my father said, a teacher institute for the arts, which works with educators, encouraging them to get more of this type of work in the schools. And we do it in informal settings. And I just want to share with you a couple of the ways that we use this work. So I'm just going to remind everyone that if you want to send in any questions about the artwork that you saw, I'm going to do a little interview afterwards with my Abba. So any questions, just plug them in on the website and they will get to us and I will repeat them and then we'll be able to hopefully answer your questions. So the work you saw before on Akedat Yitzchak, on the story of the binding of Isaac, this one, one of the main ways we use it is to engage with other Jewish texts. So we call our program From Text to Symbol. And the idea is that just as in this example where the story of Akedat Yitzchak is translated word for word in symbolic images, we give our participants the opportunity to engage with a different text in that kind of a format. So they're working on reading the text, identifying what are the 10 or so minimum elements that they need to in order to create their key. Then they create a color code. And then they work with the verses, pasuk, pasuk, verse by verse, word by word, and try to think how can they represent them symbolically. We use this artwork as inspiration, and then they create their own. I have a few examples here of some participants that worked on projects here at Kol Ha'od, just so you get a sense. It's very accessible. You don't need to be an artist, but you do need to think creatively and abstractly, and give meaning, and it allows you and sort of forces you to engage with the real meaning and create your own parshanut, your own explanation of the text. Here's a group of students showing their entire scroll. It was large scale of one of the stories they did. So this can be applied with many different types of text. We also have participants sometimes process their a journey that they went through using this type of work, as well as other artwork that we have. The midot that you saw, the mensch maker, make me a mensch, is also a very, very popular tool that we use. The way we use it is by enabling our participant to engage in a chavruta, in paired learning, but instead of their chavruta being only text-based, they are engaging with these concepts of midot, with these values. So, for example, here we have tikkun, repair, or yirah, awe. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have them discuss in their chavruta what this midah means to them, how they understand it, if they can think of people who embody this midah in their life. And we get the conversation going and get the two participants in the chavruta to discuss it. We then invite them to open just the top flap, where there's a little poem meditation on this midah. They read it and discuss it again in their chavruta. They see how it interacts with what they discussed already. And then we invite them to open the third flap and see the artwork inside and interpret it, try to understand how this abstract value or idea of yirah, in this case, of awe, is reflected in the image. It's unbelievable how much people have to say, and every single time we run this session, we hear new insights, new interpretations, because there's something about the prompts and the preempting of the initial part of the conversation that really allows the artwork to speak and to bring out different perspectives. And then the participants can engage with other ones, share with each other. And then we always have a hands-on piece where the participants themselves will create a similar work of their own. So they don't only engage with the work and see it and get inspired by it, but they also have an opportunity to take a midah, something that's meaningful to them, and work on it. One of the most exciting groups we have are working with groups of Honeymoon Israel, where we got couples who are early on in their relationship and building their life together. And inspired by this, the couple will choose a midah that's important to them, a value that's important to them to base their home on, and they will together both write a written piece and create an image. Let's see if I have some pictures of that. I think I do. Here's some of these. So you can see participants of different ages, different backgrounds. And what's really beautiful is that the way the workshops are built, you don't need to have any artistic background or experience. And it really allows the participants to think creatively and deeply on the topics that they're engaging with. The last piece you saw, the bencher, the Birkat Hamazon, was, as Abba said, originally designed as a toolkit for our Teacher Institute, where we take Judaic studies teachers and art teachers and help them learn how to integrate more creativity and arts into the Jewish studies classroom. So this is a tool where you can really focus on understanding the Hebrew words and expressing them visually, so that every single word of Birkat Hamazon, of the grace after meals, is given meaning. And so instead of just singing or saying by rote, the students have to engage with what the real actual meaning of the words is. Inspired by this, they then create their own works like this that they can do on any other prayers, texts, Hebrew words, and we have some great examples of how the teachers are using these in the classroom, how participants are creating their own artwork. And just before we move on to the questions, I'll just point out that in the background here, there's an exhibit of posters, Parsha posters by an artist based in DC, originally from LA, named Hillel Smith. Hillel took a challenge of creating a graphic design image for every Parsha, every Torah portion during the year. And each one contains not only the name of the parasha, but an image or a striking image from the content of the parasha. And some of them are very clear and obvious, and some of them you have to really search a little more in order to find. So I think we'll take some questions now. Abba, come on. So we're over here now, and I'm just checking if on the chat if we have any questions. So the first one is David and Elyssa. Can you speak about or give some examples about how engaging in the creative artistic process has given you or your participants a greater understanding of Jewish ideas and traditions, insights that you wouldn't necessarily have gained without engaging in the creative artistic process?
For me, that's really part of the essence of what I do, because whenever I'm given a challenge, an artistic challenge, as I said, the first part is always going into the tradition. And I learned so much from this, and then sharing it and passing it on, and then the feedback from the students and the participants always gives us fresh insight.
I'll give a story that I like to share, which is there was a group. We had a group of Jewish artists from, I think, Minneapolis, who came to Israel about a week before Passover, before Pesach, and asked us to do a presentation for them of Haggadot. So you were away, I think, and I shared Abba's Haggadah. I shared the Haggadah of Rabbi Matt Berkowitz, who's another Kol Ha'od founder, and Eliyahu Sidi, another Jerusalem artist. And the participants were loving it, engaged, asking questions. But on the side was their tour guide, an older Israeli secular man. And a lot of times when the groups come, the tour guide will go outside to make phone calls or other logistical arrangements. But this tour guide sat there the entire time and listened. And at the end, he came up to me and he said, "Now I understand what I've been missing at the Seder my whole life, because it's always just words and something you mumbled and read. But by seeing it in artistic format, and seeing those ideas, for example, the idea we saw earlier of from servitude to service, or other pages where the idea, the concept was really represented through the artwork. It allowed this man to engage with the ideas behind the Seder in a way that was so much more meaningful. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. And a few days later, he called me and he said, would you come and do another session for me and my friends? Because I think there are a lot of other people out there that are missing this kind of an experience. And so we did another session, and that's a perfect example for me of how using the beauty of the art and the magic of the art, people can engage with the Jewish ideas and traditions in a way that they never had an opportunity to before. I'm checking, how is the micrography in the Haggadah produced or shrunk? Digitally?
Shrunk? God forbid. It's all done at the scale you saw it. If we go back to my studio, I'll show you the little feather that I use. Most of the Haggadah, when I did with just my glasses removed. Now at an older age, I would use magnification while I'm doing it, but it's all done there's no digital tricks. It's all done at the scale that you saw it there, by hand with a turkey feather and ink.
All right.
No shrinking. Should I do some minion stuff to finish
I'm
up?
looking for one. Oh, here's another question. Art and Jewish learning, says Nancy, are two of my favorite combinations and create a Hidur mitzvah. You are leaders in this, of course, and I am inspired with ideas. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
We don't know where you are in the world, but we're very happy to hear that. And we invite you here to Jerusalem to come join with us.
Another one.
Okay, can you give some sense of the state of mind engendered within you when you hand create these works of art, especially when scribing Hebrew text? You must be concentrating on line, proportion, etc. But how are your thoughts at the time affected by the content of your work? What is it like for you? What's the process going on inside?
I guess that's for me.
Yeah.
So it is a kind of, for me, a meditative state, and it's always a balance between trying to be accurate with the text and, as you say, the aesthetics are always being considered. I have to be aware of the flow of the line as I'm writing it, when I'm getting toward the end. So there's a lot going on as the writing is happening, but it's a very, very concentrated, very focused, and it is kind of I think it is a kind of meditative state, if that makes any sense. The writing itself.
But can you share with us a little bit about how you go through the creative process and how do the sparks come to you?
Whoa, that's a hard one. Well, one of the things that we do through Kol Ha'od in our Teachers Institute, and that I've been doing for many years, is about creative process and how to teach creativity. The short answer, I think, is that most creative process is a kind of metaphorical thinking. And the basic key is to immerse oneself, like I said, in the texts, focus, learn as much as you can. But then the key, I think, creatively, is once you've done that, you must leave it. And that can be done in many different ways. But once you're immersed in your problem or your issue or whatever you're trying to do, you focus it, you learn it, you study it, then you leave it. And that's where the aha moment can come. As long as you're pounding away at a problem, you'll get, I think, a non-creative solution. That is an obvious solution. It's when you immerse, leave, and come back and use metaphorical thinking that's where the creative spark usually comes from.
Thank you. I'm just checking if we have any more questions. And if not, we would like to thank you all very much for listening and watching this evening for us, this morning or afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. We hope that this maybe started off your global day of Jewish learning with some beauty, hopefully not too much ugliness, and inspires you to do some more Hidur Mitzvah and take on the creative challenges yourself to engage Jewishly creatively. Thank you, Amma.
Thank you. Thank you, Elyssa.